Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Christy. I hope you guys are all having a great Sunday. I'm on here today to get through Brian Higgins, and hopefully I'll be able to do another video and catch us up on everybody else that testified that day. It won't be that long because it didn't really amount to a whole lot. And then tomorrow we are back in the courtroom. So I got my wicked pissa shirt on for Boston, since we're talking about Boston. Go ahead and give this a like on your way in if you don't mind, and if you're not subscribed, get subscribed. And as you're watching or after you're watching, pop off in the comments about what you're thinking, where your head's at, how you feel about the trial, the testimony, the witnesses so far, so we can all have a discussion. Okay, well, I guess it's time to jump into Brian Higgins, whether we want to or not. So this is Brian Higgins. He said he lives in Barnstable County since 2018. And I was like, that's Barnstable County. That seems very vague, but I looked it up and I guess it's Cape Cod. He is a special agent with the Department of Justice, ATF, for 15 years. Prior to that, he was a lieutenant with the Cambridge Fire Department for 15 years. He lived in Canton from 2017 to 2022 and sold that property January 5th of 2022 and had an in-law apartment in Roxbury in 2022. Okay, so on January 28th through the 29th, this is kind of what was going on with Higgins. He had been in New York City at the funeral for the fallen officers Mora and Rivera. He went to New York City on the 27th. January 28th, in the late morning after the services, he went home because the snowstorm was coming. He was driving his government vehicle at the time, which is a Dodge Ram. Brian Albert, Sergeant Detective of the Boston PD, Kevin Albert, a detective at Canton PD, and Eddie Hernandez, who's also a detective with the Boston PD, were with him, and they're all friends. And you know, Kevin and Brian, they're brothers. He says that he knew Eddie Hernandez the longest and Kevin Albert the least amount of time. He had an office at the Canton PD. When his sister passed away, his friend, Chief Berkowitz, offered up the space because Brian Higgins had moved there, and he is the only federal agent with an office there. So coming back from New York City, he said it was normally a 4-hour drive, but it took a little bit longer that day because traffic, weather, and they stopped and ate along the way. So when they got to Massachusetts, they stopped at Charlestown, where Brian Albert and Eddie Hernandez had their vehicles parked. They had flown down and they parked their cars there because it's closer to Boston Logan Airport. Hush it. Sorry. And then he went on and dropped Kevin Albert off at the Canton PD. While he was there, Higgins switched vehicles at the Canton PD. He got into his personal vehicle, which is the Jeep Wrangler with the plow that you've been hearing about, because he knew that he would be drinking and you can't drive government vehicles when consuming alcohol. So at the Canton PD, he has his government truck, the Dodge Ram that he drove to New York, a surveillance vehicle, his personal pickup truck, and his 2011 gray Jeep Wrangler with a 6-foot 8-inch plow attached. Higgins went to Hillside. Brian Albert agreed to meet there. It was dark. He's not sure what time it was. Again, I think it was Colin that testified. He went to his friend's house and it was dark. Not super specific, but okay, especially in the wintertime. It gets dark early. Anyway, Brian Albert arrived shortly after or beat him there. Again, not too specific. Brian Higgins ate at the Hillside and was there for about an hour, and he was drinking Jameson and ginger. Brian Albert left about 15 minutes before him and had invited him to come to the waterfall. He left Hillside and went to the waterfall at 9 p.m.-ish. Brian Albert is a good friend and co-worker with Brian Higgins. They worked closely together in their units. Brian Higgins was in fugitive apprehension with the ATF. He worked with the U.S. Marshal's Office. Brian Albert worked with fugitive apprehension for the Boston PD. So, makes sense. When he got to the waterfall, Brian and Nicole Albert, Caitlin Albert, Julie Albert, and another couple, which I'm assuming he means the Colakeithuses, and Jen and Matt McCabe were there. He says that he casually knew Matt and Jen McCabe. John O'Keefe and Karen Reed joined. He said it was a good time. There was a band. And he left at approximately midnight. He knew John O'Keefe for about a year. He met him at Hillside, and he knew John was a Boston police officer. He says that he knew Karen Reed about the same amount of time, and he knew that John and Karen were dating. He had been to John's house one time to watch the end of a Patriots game. He considered John and Karen friends. He had John's phone number, and they texted each other. So John and Karen arrived at the waterfall between 11 p.m. and closing. Karen opened her coat and took out a tall glass with clear liquid in it. We've all heard about that. He says the glass was not from the waterfall. It wasn't consistent with the type of glass the waterfall used. It was tall with bubbles on the side. Now, if you remember, everybody's favorite, Jen McCabe, said that the glass had ridges in it. And these two are giving details like everybody else. It's just like it was a tall, clear glass. But Jen saw ridges. He saw bubbles on the side. Whatever. He had a conversation with John. He said they exchanged brief greetings, like, hi, hello, how you doing? Hug, pat on the back, whatever. He did not have a conversation with Karen Reed. He had Karen's phone number, and he texted her at the waterfall, and then he texted her, well, and he says it was a flirty text. I don't know what's flirty about that, but okay. He says there was a discussion about going to D&E that transitioned into going to Brian Albert's house, and that it was an open invite to the table. Higgins had been to Brian Albert's previously for the twins' graduation party, and he dropped Brian Albert off there once. He says that he beat Brian and Nicole to Fairview. It was just a few-minute drive. He dropped the plow in the driveway and did a sweep of the driveway. Everybody said that it was just starting to snow. What snow is this man plowing out of the driveway? Exactly. But that's what he says he did. He backed out because he didn't want to get blocked in, and he parked by the mailbox. The back end of the Jeep was at the mailbox, passenger side facing the house, which is where Jen and Matt said that they saw the Jeep, but a lot of other people did not see the Jeep there. So here we go with the magical disappearing Jeep. It's like the magic school bus, but it's a magic Jeep, I guess. When he went in the house, hold on. Sorry. When he went in the house, Brian and Nicole Albert were going in at the same time. Brian Jr. was at the kitchen island. He says he was flanked by one, possibly two females, and he didn't know them. He doesn't mention Caitlin being there at all. I don't know if any of you picked up on that, but I did. I even rewound and went back and listened to make sure I didn't miss it, but he makes no mention of Caitlin being there, which I thought was kind of interesting. As he was backing out to park in front of the mailbox, he says that he saw Brian Albert on the street coming towards the house with his car. Hey. Sorry, dogs. Okay. Matt and Jen McCabe arrived later. He said pretty soon after they had gotten there. He went with Brian Albert to see pictures of his Marine son. Brian Albert was a Marine and Brian Higgins was in the Army. In another room briefly, Higgins left at 12:30 to 1 a.m. and he was one of the first to leave. He didn't... Baker. I am so sorry. I have a grumpy dog.
Baker May.
I'm sorry. I thought my husband was taking him out. I don't know what's going on. I'm just here trying to get through this. Okay. Higgins left at 12:30 to 1 a.m. He was one of the first to leave. He didn't go upstairs or to the basement. He says he went out the side door and someone was in the process of being picked up. It was a female, so I assume that would be Julie Nagel and her brother, which means that while her brother was there, his Jeep was allegedly parked by the mailbox, yet nobody in that truck saw the Jeep, so magic Jeep. While he was in the kitchen, he said he had his back to the door. Now, I kind of call bullshit on this, and this is why. And this is one, pop off in the comments and let me know, like, if you know somebody with this. So, my family is military. Like, my grandpa, my dad, my brother, my husband, my two sons, tons of friends. And my husband was security forces in the Air Force, which is basically the military police. My one son in the Navy is currently a master at arms, which, again, police. And they've been deployed. There's, I guess, a little bit of PTSD there. But even before they were deployed, they do not like to have their back to the door. I don't care. They can be shit-faced drunk. They don't want their back to the door. They want to be able to see, like, who's coming at them. It's almost like, you know, threat assessment. Their head on a swivel. They need to know. Like, we go to a restaurant, my husband will not sit with his back to the door. My son is the same way. So, this guy was in the military. This guy is a cop. Well, ATF. I find it hard to believe that he had his back to the side door and you've got all these people in there. My kids and my husband, they don't like to be around crowds. Since being in the military and being deployed, they hate crowds. And like I said, they just have this thing. And a lot of my friends are security forces because of my husband. And they're all the same way. They always like to be able to see the door. You know, they don't want somebody being able to come up behind them, basically. So I kind of call bullshit on that, but, you know, maybe Higgins is different than everybody I know. So Higgins says that he never saw John O'Keefe or Karen Reed at 34 Fairview. He texted John, "Where are you?" and got no response. He didn't see John or Karen after the waterfall. He says that he knows the name Colin Albert and knows he's Chris Albert's son, but he wouldn't know him if he saw him. No one was introduced or pointed out to him as Colin Albert. He says when he left, he started driving. He heard the plow grinding on the ground, so he stopped and lifted the plow up and drove away. He says that he drove about 1 to 2 feet before lifting the plow. He didn't notice anything outside, no other vehicles on the street, and no tire tracks. So, if there were no vehicles out there, that means, number one, Karen Reed was not there. Number two, the truck was already gone. But the truck saw Karen. And it left before Karen. So, I'm trying to make sense of that. He says that he went to the Canton PD after he left 34 Fairview because he left the key to his surveillance vehicle on his desk so someone could move it. And he went on about how, I guess Chief Berkowitz would give him a hard time. When it would snow, they like to move the cars so the lot can be plowed. And he had left the key there, so if it snowed before he got back, somebody could move the vehicle. So he says that he moved the vehicle so the lot could be plowed. He parked in the back. He went in through the sally port door. He walked past dispatch and he waved to Sergeant Good. He says there's cameras in the station and they have key card access records. He says it was 5 to 10 minutes from Fairview to the Canton PD. He went to his office, got the key, moved the vehicles to the center of the lot, and then he went to West Roxbury in his Jeep, which, and it's brought up on Cross, but I'm just going to bring it up now because I thought of it before we got to Cross. When he went to drop off Kevin Albert and get his Jeep to swap out from his government vehicle, why the hell didn't he just move everything then so he didn't have to come back? Because he says that he went after 34 Fairview at like 1:30 in the morning because he didn't want to have to come back later that morning to do it. So you're already there at like 9, before 9, and why not just do it then? But I digress. So he got home at about 1:40 a.m. He said it was between 1:30 and 2 a.m. He ate. He had a couple more drinks. He says he laid down on the couch or maybe in bed and he fell asleep. He says sometimes he falls asleep on the couch watching the news and then he gets up and he moves to the bed. He woke up to both of his phones blowing up. He's got a work phone and a personal phone. They were both blowing up at 6:30 a.m. The first call was from Chief Berkowitz and he didn't answer. He says sometimes, he said, I guess Berkowitz is a morning person and sometimes he would just like call and check in or whatever. So he didn't answer that. Then Brian Albert called and he thought, why is he calling me? And he was concerned, so he answered Brian Albert's call. He doesn't recall any phone calls with anyone between getting home and 6:30 a.m. He didn't speak to Brian Albert after leaving his house. And he says that Brian Albert was fairly recent in his contacts from the day before. So he got dressed and he went right over to 34 Fairview. He was driving his Jeep and arrived a little after 7 a.m. He says that he may have seen a police car outside, but he doesn't remember. He's got the Canton brainworm, the I can't remember problem. He parked in the driveway, maybe. He went in the house. I love how, like, the night before, he knows exactly where he parked, where the back end of the Jeep was and everything. But on this day, you know, he parked in the driveway, maybe. He went into the house. Brian and Nicole Albert were there, and Brian Jr. may have popped in and out of the kitchen area. Matt and Jen McCabe got there a short time later, and then Julie Albert showed up with a box of donuts because it was Brian Jr.'s birthday. Everyone was pretty distraught because John had been found on the lawn. He says that he first learned about John being found on the 6:30 a.m. call with Brian Albert. It didn't make sense to him. He couldn't do the math in his head because he knew John and Karen never showed up. But he said he was one of the first to leave. So how does he know? I mean, maybe they showed up after he left. You can't say, I know they never showed up, if you were the first to leave. Is it just me? I don't know. Maybe it is. So there was conversation among the group about what happened. I'm assuming he's just taking their word for it. Like, hey, we were here till this time and they never came in. Did anybody tell him about seeing the SUV outside, though? I don't know. Because he says they never showed up. Like, not, they didn't come in. They never showed up. Which to me sounds like the SUV wasn't even there. So he was there less than an hour, and then he went to the Canton PD because he was still trying to put things together in his head, and he was upset. So he didn't want to drive home. So he had to go to his office because he was upset. He says he left the Canton PD and went back to West Roxbury, and he was in his Jeep all day. A few days later, he met with troopers Proctor and Buchanan. He was familiar with Buchanan, and then he was reminded by Proctor that he had met him before. Apparently, he helped him on a gun recovery, but Higgins didn't remember him, so he must have really made quite the impression. He socialized with Buchanan. He said that he'd seen him on several occasions at a local gym. One time at the hillside, he saw Buchanan with his child after a sporting event and bought him a drink. Over the years, he probably dealt with the Norfolk County CPAC unit, which would be where, maybe he encountered Proctor. On February 3rd, he met with them and had a conversation about the events of January 28th and 29th. He gave them screenshots of text messages he had with John O'Keefe and Karen Reed. He says he consulted with a coworker friend who has the training with cell phones, and told him he wanted to provide those to state police and what was the best way to get them off his phone to do that. This best friend is Matt Kelsch, and I'm going to show you a video from Matt Kelsch testifying in the Aaron Hernandez case, just to give you an idea of this guy's knowledge.
There's a logical, a file system, and a physical, and they're a little confusing, so I'll try to just explain it in layman's terms. A logical examination is where the software, so in this case the Celebrite software, kind of has a conversation with the phone, and it asks the phone to provide certain information to the user. So it's kind of like a nice talk back and forth, where it asks maybe a phone for its text messages, and the phone provides its text messages back to the software where we can look at them. The step up from that is a file system, and that's where the software, in this case Celebrite, goes through and actually pulls the entire file system off the phone. So if you think about when you go on your computer and you go into Windows and you click through all your different folders where you save your songs or your documents, it's basically taking all those documents, all those folders, and putting it in a place where we can look at it and use it. The last certification, which is the physical analyst, is the process where the software actually goes onto the phone and it just rips that information off and copies it. So it's not really talking to or being nice with the phone anymore. It's saying, I want an exact copy of everything you have on that phone. And that's what we call when we say it's a physical as opposed to logical. And those are the two classes they teach.
And sir, I think you may have already touched upon this, but you're certified in all three of those methods with Celebrate. In other words, the logical, which gets you the least amount of information, the file system, which is somewhere in between, and then the most expansive extraction of information being the physical. You're certified in all three.
Exactly, and that's a fair explanation of the three, yes.
Wow, he is certified in all three of those Celebrate extractions. Wonder why Brian Higgins would need to call somebody that has that much experience with Celebrate software. Moving on. He had contact with John O'Keefe and Karen Reed, and he wanted to be fully transparent. Trooper Buchanan asked if it was an accurate representation of the text and if anything had been deleted. He provided text from Karen Reed from the first time that she reached out and texted him. He said nothing had been deleted, and he said the text string with John might have had older text strings that were deleted, but he had kept everything from Karen. Now, I don't know about you, because, like I said, I'm trying to come into this like a juror. I was a little shocked that she was the one that reached out to him first. I kind of had him built up in my head like, ooh, this guy's a sleazebag, and I'm kind of still there. But I thought, wow, this dude's like hitting on his friend's girlfriend. And then I found out that she texted him first, and I was kind of like, ooh, oh, okay. So, but after he read through these texts for like an hour and a freaking half, I'm like, I mean, it doesn't sound great, but like I have in my notes, like, but is that motive for murder? I mean, come on. Everything that was on his phone was provided. He said nothing was deleted and that he volunteered that to the troopers. They did not ask for text. The troopers asked specific questions about John and Karen's intimacy. Why are you asking this guy? Ew. And more detailed questions followed. I don't know what that's all about. But, Proctor was looking for nudes on Karen's phone, so whatever. He is shown a 12-page document and a 56-page document. They are what he provided to the troopers. The 12-page document is his communication with John. The 56-page document is his text with Karen Reed. So Higgins texts with John on November 24th. John reached out to him, wanted to get a drink. January 16th, he reached out to John to see if he had broken his nephew's toy when he went over to watch the Patriots game. On January 6th or 7th, he asked if John wanted him to clean his driveway because he lived a couple blocks away. He says that he had been asked repeatedly to go to John's to watch football, but he never went. He knew it was going to be the last game of the season because Patriots. He got a text from John and from Karen inviting him over. 2 separate texts, one from John, one from Karen. He says it was January 15th and then the Pats were playing the Bills. I looked, he's right. He can remember that detail, but he forgets a lot of others, which is odd. He got there just before the game was over. John, Chris Curran, and his wife, John's nephew, and Karen were there. And he played video games with John's nephew. January 29th, he had texted at 12:20 a.m. to John, "You coming here? Question mark, question mark, question mark." So on a break, the texts were reprinted so they were easier to read. The text between Higgins and Karen Reed is now a 118-page document. I am not going to read them all to you. I won't do that to you. If you want to hear him read them, it's out there. You can go find it, but I cannot. No, not doing it. Not doing it. I have a few of the highlights here. So January 12th of 2022, he had never communicated prior with Karen Reed, and he got a text from an unknown number. At 8:27 p.m., he gets a text, and it says, "Hey, Brian, it's Weed Whacker." He responded with a question mark. Then he explains that Weed Whacker is a nickname for Karen Reed. Apparently, he was leaving his residence one day in his surveillance vehicle that Karen wouldn't have recognized, and he saw Karen using a weed whacker. He says he beeped his horn, and she gave him the finger. He turned around and went back. Like I said, he's in his work vehicle, and Karen said, "Get the fuck away from me, my husband's a Boston police officer." And then Higgins rolled the window down more, and she recognized him, and now it's like a joke, a nickname, whatever. So Karen is the weed whacker. On January 13th, there was a text. He had asked how she got his number, and she responded, "The Melissa and Lido show," and that refers to people from Hillside. And it says something about Carrie, and Carrie was Carrie Curran, who was Chris Curran's wife, not Carrie Roberts. So here I just put 3 of the screenshots up here. The first one with the Smirnoff Ice picture is the one that Karen sent where she's like, "It's the weed whacker," and he question mark, she sends that, and then he's like, "Yo." It was like high school. Like, if this qualifies as flirting in Canton, y'all, I'm so happy I'm married. On the next one, it says, "Did you try those Smirnoff screwdrivers? I stopped at the Hilly for one last night." He says, "Ha ha. How did you get my digits?" She says, "The Melissa and Lita show." He says, "Ha ha. I thought you creeped John's phone. Ha ha." She says, "No way. Jay was the last person. Oh, no way was I the last person in Greater Canton who didn't have your number. I think even Carrie has it." And he's like, "What?" She said, he says, "I just don't give my personal number out to anyone. How would Carrie have my number?" I don't know. And then the night of the football game, they're texting, and he's telling her, like, "You're double trouble." She's saying, "Oh, you're hot." And he said, "Are you serious or messing with me?" She's like, "No, I'm serious." He said, "The feeling is mutual. Is that bad?" "Yeah, it kind of is." How long have you thought that? She says, are you okay driving? You don't want to stay here? He was like, no, I'm fine. I got an office at the Canton PD. And he says, you didn't answer the question. And she says, I would rather you stay here. Yeah, okay. So at John's house, when he got there, he came in the front door. He was one of the last to leave. And as he was exiting, Karen was kind of like, hey, no, come this way, and led him towards the garage area. And Karen kissed him in the garage area. John was in the bathroom. Higgins says she kissed him not like a friend. It was romantic on the lips. He was taken aback and wasn't expecting it. Higgins asked why she had reached out to him more than once. He and Karen exchanged text on 9 days between the 12th and the 29th. He says he was trying to suss out Karen's intentions because he didn't want her weaponizing him against John O'Keefe. He was trying to figure out, is she at the end of her relationship with John? Like, what's going on with this girl? Karen went to Higgins' house in Roxbury after a night out with her friend in Boston, and they had a conversation. He asked if she was seriously into him. They discussed the incident in Aruba, and she didn't stay long. He said it was a weird experience. Karen invited him for drinks more than once, but he never went. There was no more kissing and absolutely no sex. They had no more interaction after John died. Like, she texted him on the 29th, John died, and he didn't respond. And I'm like, you guys have had this back and forth, you know, like you're at least friends, right? And you don't say, oh my God, I'm sorry, or yeah, I heard, are you doing okay? Nothing, no response. What? Okay, so now points on cross-examination. So we start off cross with Alan Jackson, which was fabulous. Get caught up in my notes here. So he starts off and he's like, who'd you come to court with today? And he's like, who did I ride with? He's like, no, who did you meet when you got here? He says he came with his attorney and met with him that morning and during the court recess. And Jackson had pointed to somebody sitting kind of in the Karen Reed area and said, isn't that your lawyer right there? And he's like, no, that's not my lawyer. Word on the street is Jackson knew that wasn't his lawyer and it possibly was a Fed. I don't know if I believe that or not, but whatever. Because Higgy Bear's getting investigated by the feds, so that probably would have made him nervous. But he had a conversation with Lally regarding his testimony that Monday in person. It lasted an hour and a half at the DA's office, and Trooper Tully was there. Again, no one took notes. He gave Tully a piece of mail he got at his house regarding the case. They did not get into what that was. He says he was shown a pile of papers, which were the text messages, but he didn't go through them. In 2022, he's with the ATF, but he was assigned to the Bridgewater Field office. He was full-time with the U.S. Marshals Service doing fugitive apprehension. In a June 2023 hearing, he explained that his Canton PD office, he calls it a working partnership, came through his personal relationship with Chief Berkowitz, and it was born out of tragedy. I mean, can we get more dramatic? And based on that friendship, he offered Higgins an office at the Canton PD. He had keycard access to the Canton PD. He could go in the Sally Port, but he didn't have access to the evidence room or the arms room. He's had the office there since 2018, so 4 years in 2022. He's still with the ATF division's operations, but he's been taken out of the field. From what I hear, that means he is now a paper pusher while he's being investigated, because they don't want to put him on a case and then something is found out in this investigation and then that's going to affect the new case. And so just push paper, Brian, push paper. Brian Higgins, Brian Albert, and Kevin Albert are in the same social circles. They know a lot of the same people. They go to the same parties and events. They have social drinks at bars, and they eat meals together. He knows all the cops at the Canton PD. Apparently, it's a pretty small department, like maybe 45 people. He's best friends with former Chief Berkowitz. He's well connected in the law enforcement community of Canton. He gave a toast at Chief Berkowitz's retirement and said, quote, "If you want to hide a body, Kenny Berkowitz is your man." He says he doesn't recall, and the footage of that has magically disappeared. Members of the DA office were there at that party, including the DA, Michael Morrissey. He says that he's known Brian Albert for 15 years. They have a social and professional relationship. They're friends. They drink together. They eat meals together. He testified that they have drank together under 50 times in 2 years, which, when I calculate that, you got 52 weeks in a year. So 50 times in 2 years is about every other week. So to me, that's kind of frequent. I don't know. Brian Albert had a fist fight with Eddie Hernandez at a Christmas party 5 years prior to 2022. In a formal interview, he was asked about Brian Albert's reputation and said even Chief Berkowitz is a little afraid of Brian Albert. He's close friends with Brian Albert's brother, Kevin Albert. He knows the Albert family relatively well, but knows Brian and Kevin Albert best. On January 28th, he drove his Jeep Wrangler to Hillside to meet up with Brian Albert. He drank 3 to 4 Jameson and Gingers at Hillside. He says Brian Albert had more than 3 or 4 beers. He always says he's going to show up, but does the Irish exit, which that's not the Irish exit. The Irish exit, you show up and you leave without saying goodbye. It's not that you don't show up at all. You have to show up to make an exit, you doofus. So he decided, and this makes no sense to me, guys. He decided it was a long, emotional day, and he decided to join Brian Albert and his family at the waterfall, so he drove his Jeep there. I don't know about you, but like when we didn't live in Oklahoma, and I would drive to Oklahoma to come visit family, and it was a long drive. And sometimes, okay, let's just say I came down here one time. My aunt was in the hospital and they thought she was dying. So it was a long drive and it was an emotional day. This guy's like, he decided to join Brian and his family at this bar. Y'all, if it's a long emotional day, I'm tired. I've been driving, like he drove back from New York City. I'm tired. I'm used up emotionally, mentally, physically. I just want to go to bed. I just want to go wherever I'm staying, go home, go to the hotel, wherever, and go to bed. I'm not going to be like, you know what? It's been a really long emotional day. I did all that driving and I'm just emotionally spent. But on this night, instead of not showing up, I'm going to go. I'm going to go. This is the right day to do it. I don't know. Didn't add up to me. So he went to John O'Keefe's house to watch the Patriots game on the 15th. Karen Reed gave him a kiss. They texted back and forth, and between him and Karen, they agreed it was just a peck. There was no quote, text of substance from Karen Reed after January 23rd at 9:40 p.m. There were 9 days of texting. Other than that kiss, there was no physical, intimate touches. Karen indicated that she was upset regarding Aruba, but she said she didn't care about the other girl. She was upset that it happened, but she didn't give a shit about the girl. So Brian Higgins repeatedly asked for clarity, but Karen Reed was non-committal. She wouldn't answer, and she outright avoided the questions. Higgins was interested in her, but said, I don't think it was at the romantic phase. When they asked him what he thought romantic was, he said, sending somebody flowers. Okay, like I said, high school. This is like the epitome of someone who peaked in high school. Am I right? Okay, so he says he was physically and sexually attracted to her. He wanted the real deal, which meant a relationship. Karen Reed never expressed anger or hatred towards John, and she was more frustrated with his extended family. And we know we've heard she wished that they would step up and help out with the kids more. She never wanted kids, so she would get frustrated that, you know, here I am, I'm with this guy, and I'm like helping raise these kids, and, you know, this just wasn't what she wanted, right? He says Karen didn't ghost him, and he was not frustrated that she quit communicating with him after the 23rd. He shared that Karen had kissed him with his department supervisor at the DOJ prior to the 29th. Why? I mean, I don't know if they're friends or whatever, but why in the world of all people are you going to be like, hey, boss, guess what? He says he never discussed his flirtatious relationship with Karen with Brian Albert. He started drinking at Hillside at 8 p.m.-ish. Brian Albert didn't tell him that John was invited to the waterfall. There was no tension between John and Karen at the waterfall. Higgins drank at least a couple whiskeys at the waterfall. He says no one was overly intoxicated. John greeted him, but Karen did not. He had no interaction with Karen Reed. He says he didn't feel ignored or upset with Karen. The, well text didn't mean, why are you ignoring me, according to Brian Higgins, and she never responded to his text. So let's see here. Got a video to watch.
On the opposite side in the corner. Isn't that right?
I don't know where she was all night, no. I don't know.
Did that upset you that she ignored you or didn't pay attention to you?
I did not feel ignored and didn't upset me at all.
But it bothered you enough to send her a text, didn't it?
No, it was a flirtatious text. It was just, that was it.
It bothered you enough to send her a text that said, with 6 M's behind it.
Okay.
And, well, correct?
Well, it wasn't like that. It was, well, that's it.
Just, well, like a well in the ground.
I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think you do too, sir. You meant, well, when are you going to pay attention to me?
No, that's not correct.
Well, why are you ignoring me?
It's not correct.
Well, am I chopped liver?
Objection.
All right, that's sustained. Mr. Jackson, let's move on.
That's exactly what it meant. How is well flirty if you're not all like, well, when are you gonna come over here and pay attention to me, babe? You know, like, well, that's not flirty. You know, damn good and well, he was like, look at her over there. She hasn't even said hi to me. She hasn't even looked in my direction. So I'm gonna send her a text. So he sends, nothing. Well, nothing. But he wasn't upset about it. Totally was not ignored either. So he was the first at Brian Albert's and one of the first to leave the waterfall. He texted John at 12:20 a.m. to see if he was coming to Fairview, but he didn't text Karen Reed to see if she was coming to Fairview. He parked his Jeep by the mailbox past the driveway. They didn't have whiskey at Fairview, and he's not a beer drinker, so he was like, I'm out. I'm not staying here very long. Y'all ain't got whiskey. I'm out. Gonna do the Irish exit now. In May of 2023, he testified, I've never been upstairs at 34 Fairview. He looked at photos in the family room on the first floor. He said there was a home gym in the basement and that he went in there summer of 2021 while at the twins' graduation party. But Brian Albert testified that Brian Higgins had never been in the house or the basement. So who do you believe? Brian Albert also said they went upstairs to look at the pictures. So Jackson, as he does, ask a question, and Higgins is so confused. And I'm like, how is this guy a ATF agent? So basically he said, you've got a house that has main floor, upstairs, and a basement, right? If the pictures are on the first floor, the main floor, and someone said they went upstairs to look at the pictures, where did the people start? This dude can't figure it out. I'm sitting there screaming at my TV, the basement, the basement, the basement. I'm like Karen Reed all of a sudden saying everything 3 times. Dude couldn't figure it out. It was like it was freaking rocket science. Jackson asked it 6 ways from Sunday. Higgins couldn't figure out what he was talking about. So Auntie Bev is like, let's just drop it and move on. But we all knew what he meant. If Brian Albert said they went upstairs to look at the pictures, that means their asses were in the basement and they went up to the first floor. Sorry for that little rant. In June of 2023, he said a tall, dark-haired male entered the house while he was there. He says this was in reference to someone's brother. It may have been Julie Nagel's brother. He didn't come in the house, y'all. He didn't come in the house. Everybody else has testified that was at the damn house. Nobody said he came in the house. Even Ryan Nagel testified and didn't say he came in the house. His sister didn't say he came in the house. So who the hell is this tall, dark-haired male? He says they only came in briefly and had a conversation with the 2 girls. To me, if you remember Mr. Cool Boy Colin, he was talking to them because they were sitting with Brian Jr. I don't know how tall he is, but he does have dark hair. And this jackass Higgins already said, I wouldn't know him if I saw him. He didn't know who this was. It was in reference to someone's brother. I don't know, but it could have been Colin. It probably wasn't John because he knows John, right? Anyway, he didn't tell troopers on February 3rd. He didn't mention that at the April 28th, 2022 grand jury. But in June of 2023, all of a sudden he remembers, oh shit, this guy came in the house. So I've got another video for you.
Mr. Higgins, do you have that in mind?
I do.
May I approach?
Yes.
You were asked the question, quote, did that male come inside the house? You answered, I believe he did. Question, so you saw someone else come? Answer, somebody else. Yes. Correct?
Yes, but I also said that I wasn't paying
Mr. Higgins,
attention.
I realize that you want to explain your answer. I've asked you a very simple question. Was that your testimony in front of another proceeding?
Yes, it was.
At another proceeding, which you were under oath?
Yes, it was.
Okay. You also said that you only remember seeing that person come in briefly. And it looked like he was having a conversation with the 2 girls briefly, correct?
Yes.
You were asked how long was the person in there roughly, and you said it was quick. Less than a couple of minutes. I mean, it was quick, correct?
Yes.
And then you were asked what he looked like, and you said, I feel like they were a little bit taller, and you had dark hair, correct?
Yes.
So you testified that a tall, dark-haired male came into the house at least briefly in your testimony, correct?
Yes.
Approximately when in the timeline of events did that unidentified male enter the residence?
I don't know the time frame. It would have been while I was there.
When you gave your statement to the Massachusetts State Police, you didn't tell them about a tall, dark-haired male coming into the residence at 34 Fairview, did you, on February 3rd?
I don't recall.
You were specifically asked by ADA Lally when you testified before the state court grand jury on April 28th, 2022, who else was present, correct?
Yes.
And you never mentioned a tall, dark-haired male coming into the house, did you?
No.
However, on June 1st, 2023, at this other proceeding, you were specifically instructed at the start of your testimony that it was a crime to give materially false statements in that proceeding, correct?
Yes.
And that's the proceeding in which you admitted that there was a tall, dark-haired male who came in the house. Yes or no? Yes or no? It was that proceeding.
Can you answer that, yes or no?
No, I can't, Your Honor.
Next question, Mr. Jackson.
The quotations or the quotes that I just read you and that you just looked at,
Yes.
that was from the June 1, 2023 hearing, wasn't it?
I don't know.
All right. It had to have been while he was there. Duh. Otherwise, you wouldn't have seen it. Anyway, like I said, my thoughts were Colin Albert. And did anybody else start singing, I wish I was a little bit taller, I wish I was a baller, when he said, I think he was a little bit taller. Sorry. I'm just having a day. I'm having a moment. Okay. So he was at Brian Albert's house less than an hour. He said, see you later, and left. He walked out the side door, down the driveway, from the house to the Jeep. It was about 30 feet. There was nothing in the yard. He turned on the lights on the Jeep. He didn't see a body. The plow scrapes for about a foot. He's driving towards the flagpole, moving forward, didn't see a body. He's a first responder and also a tactical medic. He went from Fairview to the Canton PD to move vehicles. In a February 3rd interview with Massachusetts State Police, he said he went to Canton PD to fulfill some administrative obligations. At the April 28th grand jury, he said he went to do administrative work. Now he testifies that moving cars would be administrative. Tell me in the comments if you agree with that, because I don't. When I think of administrative work, I'm thinking like paperwork. That kind of stuff. Something at your desk. He said he had been there earlier to swap vehicles after the drive from New York City, but he didn't do it then, which I've already talked about. I don't think that makes sense, but again, whatever. To each their own. He entered Canton PD through a door to the right of the Sally Port as you come in the main entrance. While at the Canton PD at 1:30 a.m., he could see if there was any activity going on. He says no, but I mean, are you blind? If you're there, you're going to see it, right? From Canton PD to his house is about a 15 to 20 minute drive. He lives alone. He slept on the couch or in bed. He's never said anything about sleeping on a couch that night, anytime before this testimony. He puts his phone on his nightstand at night. He didn't go on social media because he said he doesn't have social media. Apparently at one point he testified, yeah, I don't have the gram. The call from Chief Berkowitz woke him up before 7 a.m. At 2:22 a.m., there were 2 calls with Brian Albert. He has no recollection of any phone calls. He's shown the phone records. At 2:22 and 35 seconds, Brian Albert called Brian Higgins for 1 second. At 2:22:52 a.m., Brian Higgins called Brian Albert for 22 seconds. This is 5 minutes before the Haas long to die in the cold search. When you put that together, doesn't that seem sketchy AF? 5 minutes before Jen McCabe isn't searching Haas long to die in the cold, these two are having butt dials. What? Come on. So at a prior hearing, he said this was a butt dial. Brian Albert was inadvertently called back. Brian Albert used that same word. I don't know a lot of people that say inadvertently, but Brian Albert, if you remember in his testimony, they said, how did he get inadvertently called back? And he goes, I don't know, because it was inadvertent. Remember that? Now Higgins is using the same word. He previously testified yes. When asked if he called Brian Albert back, he said they didn't say anything, and it was possibly picked up by Brian Albert, but he didn't say anything either, so he terminated the call. He says there was no discussion, and he never talked to Brian Albert at 2:22 a.m. So I got another video for you.
You did not make or receive any calls after returning home that night.
No,
You also testified that you did not use your phone that night to go on social media, correct?
that's correct.
You indicated that you didn't go on social media because you don't have social media. You don't use it that much.
I don't.
All right. So you testified that the first call you received after returning home on the 29th was a call from Chief Berkowitz just before 7 a.m., which woke you up. Is that right?
Sounds like a setup.
It was around 6:30ish, I think.
And it turns out, Mr. Higgins, that was a lie, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't a lie.
And those phone records established that you and Brian Albert actually exchanged not one, but two phone calls at 2:22 a.m. that morning, at a time when you claimed you were in bed asleep, correct?
I have no recollection of any phone calls. It has my name, my telephone number, correct?
And it indicates that on January 29th, 2022, at 2:22 and 35 seconds, you received a call from Brian Albert, duration of 1 second, correct?
Yes,
In other words, Brian Albert called you at 2:22 and 35 seconds, but it looks like you missed the call, correct?
I see the 1 second call, yes.
There's a second call just below that on the same date at 2:22 and 52 seconds from you to Brian Albert. Do you see that one?
Yes,
And the duration of that call is 22 seconds, correct?
I see that, yes.
So 17 seconds after you missed a call, according to these records, from Brian Albert, you called him back, and there was a call lasting 22 seconds. Is that right?
That's what the records say.
So the fact is, you were speaking to Brian Albert in the middle of the night, approximately 3 hours before Mr. O'Keefe's body was found in his yard, correct?
No, that's not correct.
And that was 5 minutes before 2:27 a.m. when there was a Google search for how long to die in the cold, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
And then, of course, you lied about that under oath in that prior proceeding by saying, I don't remember this phone call.
Objection.
I always tell the truth.
Did you lie under oath, sir?
No, I did not.
Would you tell us if you did?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
You had an explanation for what that 22-second call may have been and what the prior call may have been, correct?
Yes.
What was your explanation?
Well, I used a phrase that people commonly used as a butt dial.
Damn it, Brian.
Another butt dial?
Another butt dial. He got a butt dial and then his butt called the other butt back.
I think it's possible that he could have been inadvertently called back, but I have no recollection of that, nor did I have any conversation with anybody.
But you admitted that you lived alone, correct, Mr. Higgins?
That's correct.
You have an iPhone at the time.
Yes.
But in fact, that number, reflecting those records, is in fact, or was in fact, an iPhone. Is that right?
Yes.
You already indicated under oath that you don't sleep with your iPhone. You keep it on your bedside table. Is that right?
Most often, yes.
There's nobody else in your room. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you had your ringer on because you were awakened the next morning by a call from Chief Berkowitz, right?
Yes, the ringer was on.
When somebody calls you and you miss the call, there's a notification that shows up on that iPhone. Isn't that right?
I don't know how mine's set up at the time. I don't know.
If you open up your phone app and you go to recents, it shows all the missed calls, correct?
I think you can get to them, yes.
And you know that the iPhone does not automatically call people back. That is not a thing, right? You miss a call from someone, it's not just going to automatically re-ring them.
Yes, I think we both know that, yes.
So to call somebody back, you have to go on your iPhone, open it up from a locked position, navigate to a phone application, then navigate to a contact, and then make a call, correct?
Objection.
I have no recollection of answering the phone or calling anybody back.
After you were shown these phone records at that prior hearing, in that hearing at least, you finally admitted that you did in fact call Brian Albert back, but this time you claimed the two of you just sort of sat in silence. Isn't that right?
Objection.
So I'm going to sustain it in that form. You can ask it.
Do you remember being asked, quote, did you call him back, end quote, and you answered yes. And then there was a question.
There was a series of questions there. That's only a fragment of what I said.
I'm not done yet, Mr. Higgins. Can you answer my question?
Yes. Did you call him back?
What's the answer?
Yes.
Thank you. May I approach?
Yes.
Did not have a 22-second call with Brian Albert. There was no conversation.
Did anybody else have like a flashback to Clinton? I did not have sexual relations with that woman. So to get into that a little further before I comment, I'm going to let Yannetti explain to you about why this is so improbable. This was during a pretrial hearing, and this is priceless, but absolutely true.
Brian Albert back, and that call lasted for 22 seconds. Now, when he was first confronted, Brian Higgins first tried to claim that it had to have been a butt dial. That term butt dial is used by many of the Commonwealth's witnesses to explain the many calls between them and among them. And I've never seen a case where there have been so many butt dials, to be frank. But Mr. Higgins was already locked in. He already testified his phone was on the bedside table. His butt was in the bed, the phone was in the table. The two could not have met, Your Honor. There was no possibility.
I mean, think about it, right? Like, your phone is on the table, your butt is in the bed, and never the two shall meet. How did it happen? I mean, that's some talent. I thought it was pretty talented that, like, he got a butt dial, and then his butt called that person back. I thought that was talent, but then when you add in the fact that the phone was on the nightstand, it's amazing. Ooh, I froze. What happened? Oh. Sorry, technical difficulties thanks to my dogs. Okay. Anyway, moving on. So he says that he was in shock, trying to figure out what happened because John and Karen never showed up. He said Jen McCabe said that Karen Reed opined that she had hit John O'Keefe. Higgins said, "You need to tell Canton PD." He left when Lank and Gallagher showed up. He spent the day at the Canton PD, even though he was not on duty. The keycard records show that he was there from 9 a.m. until after 5 p.m. He spoke to Chief Berkowitz, but not Brian Albert or Kevin Albert while he was there. Remember that. Didn't speak to Brian or Kevin while he was there. He's shown the Canton PD key swipe log. It's a 167-page document. At 1:27 a.m., it shows him swiping in to move the cars, that he went to the second floor, which is where his office is. He says the scene was cleared when he got to Brian Albert's. He just parked and walked in, like nobody asked him for his ID or anything like that, because we know there was no crime scene established, so nobody was keeping track of who was in and who was out. So the key card records for January 29th of 2022, 9:23 and 39 seconds, he got access to Sallyport. 9:23 and 50 seconds, he went from booking, or he got into booking from the Sallyport. He's moving in and around the PD at various times all day long. From 11:52 a.m. to 2:05, he may have been out for lunch. There's kind of a gap there. At 2:05, he comes back. He got entry through the Sallyport. At 3:10 p.m., he called Kevin Albert for 12 minutes. At 3:24 p.m., Brian Albert called him for 6 minutes. He says he has no recollection, and he also said that he didn't talk to them while he was there, so that's a lie. And they show him the phone records. He also had 2 calls with Chief Berkowitz, and then a call with Brian Albert again. Higgins says that he wasn't getting any information at Canton PD. The phone calls, he says he talked to them because they're friends. Let's see. I think I've got...
Mr. Higgins, what time did you leave Brian Albert's house?
It would have been, I believe, when Sergeant Lank arrived, and I think Lieutenant Gallagher might have been with him.
You weren't scheduled to work that Saturday, correct?
No.
But you didn't go home and get some sleep or run errands. You went directly to Canton PD from 34 Fairview yet again, didn't you?
Who could sleep after somebody just was discovered like that? I don't know that I spent the entire day there, no.
Well, you've got a key card, right?
I do have a key card.
And that key card logs swipes.
That's correct.
So it logs where you go, access to, and access inside the
Yes.
Canton PD, correct?
Yes.
When you got to Canton PD, and you're telling this jury you don't know how long you spent there.
I don't know how long I spent there. I don't know if I left and I came back. I don't recall. I see.
Access granted, Brian Higgins, rear entry to secure corridor, rear entry to secure corridor, correct?
Yes.
All right, so that appears to be what the log entry or the key swipe entry looks like when it's logged, correct?
Yes.
And that shows that you were granted access to the Sallyport and then from Sallyport to booking, correct?
Since booking to Sallyport, Sallyport to booking.
Okay, so that's a key swipe. You either enter into the Sallyport from booking or from booking into the Sallyport.
Yes. If the card was swiped, I was there.
I mean,
40747.
correct.
I have it. Access granted. Brian Higgins, booking to Sallyport, booking to Sallyport.
And there's no record in that document of you exiting, correct? That's just booking to Sallyport.
Yes.
And you're aware that that's about 90 minutes before Karen Reed's SUV was delivered to that Sally Port, correct?
No, I'm not aware of that.
You and Chief Berkowitz were moving in and through, at least in some parts of the day, in and through Canton PD together, correct?
At some points we might have been together. We weren't together all day.
Matter of fact, he was also in the Sally Port around the same time you were, correct?
I don't recall that, no.
You're aware that there's video surveillance feeds in the Sally Port garage, correct?
That's correct, yes. Around the building.
Were you in the Sally Port at 5:36 when the car was delivered?
I don't have any recollection of that, no.
Sounds like a setup.
One thing to say I don't remember, it's another thing to say, no, I was not there.
I don't remember being there, no.
Is it possible that you could have been there when that car was delivered?
I don't believe I was, no.
You don't believe you were?
I don't believe I was, no.
You're aware that the video surveillance feed from the Sally Port garage at or around 5:36, the precise time when the car was delivered, is missing, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Missing? It's missing?
Of course it's freaking missing. So the key card records for January 29th at 3:57 and 36 seconds, he gets access booking to Sallyport. 4:07:47 access booking to Sallyport, and there's no record of him exiting, as we just heard. And that this is 90 minutes before Karen Reed's SUV is brought in. At 5:36 p.m., her SUV is in the Sallyport. He says that he didn't see the grocery bag with the red Solo cups in it in the Sallyport. Higgins and Chief Berkowitz were in the Sallyport at the same time, but he says he doesn't remember seeing him. At 5:36 and 37 seconds, Karen Reed's SUV is delivered to the Sallyport. At 5:42 p.m., Chief Berkowitz called the desk to close the Sallyport doors. Higgins doesn't believe he was in the Sallyport at this time. The video from the Sallyport at 5:36 p.m. is missing. 45 minutes of it. Do you think that could be when they got the taillight pieces? Or got some of the blood from the Solo cups on the SUV? Anything could have happened. At 6:12 p.m., Brian Albert called Brian Higgins. At 6:16 p.m., Chief Berkowitz calls Brian Higgins. Shows him the phone records. Of course, he doesn't recall because of the whole Canton brainworms. 6:12 p.m., Brian Albert calls Brian Higgins. 1 minute, 37 seconds. 6:16, Chief Berkowitz calls Brian Higgins for 5 minutes and 15 seconds. These conversations are regarding taillight pieces found at the location. And remember, no video for 45 minutes after her SUV got there at 5:36. 6:12 and 6:16, we're already talking about taillight pieces. Higgins doesn't remember the conversations, but testified previously that the conversations were about the taillight pieces being found at the location. Again, he says he has no information regarding the investigation. On February 3rd, he had an interview with Trooper Proctor in Sharon, Massachusetts. They wouldn't let him say where. Everybody else has told us where they did their interviews. They wouldn't let him say where, just that it was not at a police station. He had talked to Brian Albert before his interview, and he's had numerous conversations with Brian and Kevin Albert and Chief Berkowitz about the case. On February 4th, Chief Berkowitz called to personally tell him that he had found pieces of taillight at 34 Fairview. The same Chief Berkowitz that he had been in the Sallyport with. Again, he says he doesn't recall being in the Sallyport with him. Brian Albert also called him, and he said that was probably when he told him about the taillight. And he shows him a transcript. In June of 2023, remember, federal grand jury, Higgins said, "If that's what Chief Berkowitz told me, listen, I didn't do anything wrong in this." That's an odd response, right? Well, he explains that he felt they, the feds, were being accusatory, and he was trying to explain what was going on, and what he had said over that was, I can't be 100% positive. It's probable, regarding how the calls came in that day. After spending all day at the Canton PD on the 29th, the next day he called a friend named Matt Kelsch. I showed you his video earlier. This is his best friend. Matt Kelsch is a special agent with the ATF and works at the FBI Regional Computer Forensics Lab. Higgins asked Kelsch how to pull text strings off of his personal cell phone for the purpose of providing them to law enforcement. He used a machine belonging to the FBI, a federal resource. Higgins' attorney, William Connolly, is brought in. The jury's out for this part. Jackson is going to make an offer of proof regarding a question that he's going to ask. Jackson says Brian Higgins used federal resources for personal gain. He contacted Matt Kelsch, a federal agent, and utilized a federal facility. The two of them utilized federal resources, some type of machine, for his own personal gain, so that he could, as a witness in no official capacity or in any official case, and in Matt Kelsch's capacity as an individual rather than an agent, they worked together to download certain information, bless you, from the witness's phone in anticipation of turning that highly selective, highly curated information over to law enforcement so that he could later ultimately destroy his phone, which this witness in fact did. He says, is Brian Higgins aware it is a federal offense to use any public office for his own private gain? In other words, an ATF agent cannot use federal resources for personal gain. Is Higgins aware that you can't use your own federal office for private gain? That it's a federal offense? Higgins says no, he's not aware. Now I want to show you his interaction with his lawyer. Remember how he said you couldn't have a conversation in 22 seconds? There's no way. Well,
You acknowledge that there's a 22-second phone call in your phone records, correct?
That's what's reflected by the record.
And 22 seconds is quite an amount of time. Would you agree?
It's 22 seconds.
As a matter of fact, it's about this long, with the court's permission.
The court does not give permission. That's argument, Mr. Jackson.
If we were to count off 22 seconds, that's an uncomfortably long time, is it not?
No,
It's long enough to have a conversation, isn't it?
I didn't have a conversation.
Is 22 seconds long enough to have a conversation?
No.
A human being can't have a conversation in 22 seconds?
Sure they could. I don't think it's anything of substance.
Okay, so that's my question. Is it 22 seconds long enough to have a conversation?
I don't agree with it, no.
Going to be asked. I don't know if there's been an objection to them. I'm not sure I'm going to let them in. But I wanted to give you the opportunity to speak privately with your client in the bathroom there. Can you do it in short order? Or do you need
I can do it in about 10 seconds.
so you can't have any conversation of substance in 22 seconds, but his lawyer can give him advice in less than 10 seconds. And that advice was, we overheard it on the mic before they went out, he told him, plead the fifth if you feel like you need to. Higgins was successful in getting information off his phone that he selected by working with Matt Kelsch. Higgins says Kelsch, walked me through on how I could pull the text string with John O'Keefe and Karen Reed. He walked me through the process of how to use the machine. Jackson asked, where's your phone? Higgins doesn't have it anymore. He threw it away. Just threw his iPhone away. He says he was aware of a court order on September 30th to not destroy phone data, and he was served with a notice. On September 29th, the day before, he changed phone carriers and phone numbers, and he says, and I maintained the phone. Now, come on, guys. Brian Albert upgraded his phone the day before the freaking preservation order. Same thing with Higgins. Who the hell do they know? Who was feeding them this information? Because I'm sorry. Yes, there are coincidences, but in this case, there's too many. And both of these guys upgraded their phones, got rid of all the data on their phones the day before they get served with a preservation notice. Come on. He removed the SIM card, drove onto a military base, threw the card in one dumpster and the phone in another. And that's where we ended that day. When we came back, Jackson wasn't there. It was a scheduled day off. I think his daughter was graduating. Anyway, since we only had court that one day that week, he flew back to California and was like spending time with his family. I think he might have had to make an appearance in another case that he is involved in. I'm not sure, but we knew he wasn't going to be there. So Yannetti takes over the cross. Regarding the September 2022 preservation order, Higgins never received anything in writing canceling or lifting that order. He just decided to get rid of his phone without consulting anyone. He says he didn't do a factory reset. On May 5th of 2023, he met with people, I don't know who, I mean investigators, but who, I don't know, and told them that he did a factory reset of the phone. Of course, he doesn't recall. He's shown the interview transcript. Higgins says the transcript is not accurate. Again, we've got another report that is wrong. He did not make those statements. Again, another person saying somebody wrote something down and I didn't say that. He says he doesn't know if he took out the SIM card, cutting it up or breaking it would destroy it. He previously testified on June 1st of 2023, federal grand jury, under oath, I made sure somebody couldn't put it in their phone, the SIM card. So he destroyed the SIM card. He put the SIM card in a trash bag. He put the phone in a trash bag, drove to a military base, threw it in a dumpster. He says that he didn't transfer anything from his old phone to the new one. And he gives this explanation of how he's more attached to his work phone than his personal phone because he's divorced and he doesn't have kids. So he didn't have the type of memories on his phone that most people do. He had text with Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Kevin Albert on his old phone, but he didn't extract those. He only extracted the ones between John and him and Karen. January 29th, the plow was down for maybe a foot. He says that he drove his car in the center of the road and there were no red plastic pieces on it. Karen Reed initiated the text January 12th at 8:23 p.m. He can remember that. He can remember that specific detail. But all this other stuff, he can't recall. He can't remember. Come on, man. They talked about Aruba and the kiss through text and in person. From January 19th to the 23rd, there were no texts between those dates. And between the 23rd and the 28th, there were no texts between those dates. He didn't discuss the text with anyone because he was embarrassed. He said they didn't show him in a good light because he was friends with John O'Keefe. He found it hard to believe, and it came out of left field. Sorry, we're on redirect now. I'm sorry. He didn't speak to Brian Albert at 2:22 a.m. He doesn't remember making or receiving a call at that time. You have to swipe the key card to go out of booking and the Sallyport doors. 18 entries out of 4,000 plus entries were with his card at Canton PD on January 29th. September 30th. Oh, and let me just bring this up really quick. He also made a comment about how if you've got your key card in your pocket and you're standing close enough to one of the swipey things and it's sensitive enough, the door can magically open. So we may have a case of a butt swipe at the Canton PD. September 30th, he received the preservation order. Early October, it was October 21st actually, he was made aware that the order was denied on October 5th, but he knew there was an appeal period. He disposed of the phone because it was beaten and broken up. Wow, that's similar to what Brian Albert said about his phone. And he got a new phone. In July of 2022, he says a target of an investigation called him on his personal number. Apparently his number had been found on open source internet. He thought, wow, I need to get rid of that phone number because he did a lot of undercover work. Okay. He has no specific memory of what he did to the SIM card, but he previously testified, if I'd done it, this is what I would have done. Which immediately, I hate to make the comparison, but made me think of O.J. Simpson and his book, If I Did It. He normally tossed his trash at the base because there was no trash pickup at his residence in Barnstable County, and, you know, it's just what you do. Although I have heard that in Barnstable County, where his residence is, there isn't trash pickup, but they let you take your trash to the dump. You don't need to take it to the base. January 29th, he saw nothing on the side of the road. If he had seen John O'Keefe, he would have done something to make a difference. On recross, they go into the July 2022 phone call. It says he got a call from the target of an investigation on July 25th of 2022, but he didn't change his phone number until September, the month he received the preservation order. So was it really about the call he got in July of 2022? Really? And he just waited till September? I don't know. He was not proud of the text to Karen Reed. He was embarrassed, but he told his boss about it, about the kiss, and possibly about the text. But he was super embarrassed. Yannetti asked if he knows what consciousness of guilt is, and of course there is an objection. September 29th, he got a new phone number and a new phone. September 30th, he got the preservation order, and as I said, apparently at the Canton PD, there was a butt swipe with the key card. You stand close enough and it's sensitive enough, door opens. There is a butt dial epidemic in Canton. So that's it for Mr. Higgins' testimony. I do have everybody else's testimony. Like I said, I don't know if I'm going to get to it today. It's starting to look kind of stormy outside. I already have a headache. But we will be caught up very, very soon. And then I'm making a fun video of what, if anything, do we know going into week 6. Not a lot, really. But I found some fun statistics that we can kind of share and have a little lighter moment about during what is a very serious murder trial. So hopefully I'll get that put together and get that out there to you really soon. So thanks for spending part of your day with me. Give this a like if you haven't already, please. It would mean a lot to me. It helps get the video out there. And if you aren't subscribed, get subscribed. Pop off in the comments. Let me know what you think. And as always, I will see you all in the next one. Bye.